Again, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation to the Leelanau Scenic Heritage Route Committee. And the property owners along Little Traverse Lake Road hope that after today perhaps you would have a greater understanding and perspective of some of the problems with the Sleeping Bear Heritage Trail route as proposed. And our goal is really to present a solution to you and a proposal for you to consider. And we think this is one that will actually create a greater legacy and really create America's most beautiful trail. We don't need to discuss in depth the public comment history. You guys have done a tremendous amount of work. There's been a lot of input, a lot of stakeholder participation. But when the trail was first proposed and the public notices were sent out, the trail was routed along M22. That's what was on the map. That was what was noticed on the south side of Traverse Lake. There's been a lot of changes in proposed routes. Some of those have been publicized, some of them have been more hard to follow, at least for the residents, especially those that live seasonally along the lake. We're a little disappointed that the stakeholder group, the subcommittee, was disbanded because there's probably still issues regarding the trail that some public input and stakeholder input would be helpful, but we appreciate the opportunity here and the leadership that you guys present or provide. We submitted 200 petitions to the Leelanau County Road Commission as well as the National Park Service. That represents over 70% of the property owners. Those numbers are growing week by week as we're receiving more, basically opposed to the current proposed route options down Traverse Lake Road. And again, our goal and our belief is that we can consider superior options that really can create a real legacy for the Heritage Trail. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of some of the Traverse Lake Road features. You probably may be familiar with it. Hopefully after the meeting you could drive down the road and to look at those features and envision what a trail might look like and the impact upon those features. The first thing that you'll come to is the Cedar Wetlands right off of M22. This here is all private property, but these are cedar wetlands where the water table is just a foot or two below the road surface. These are unstable soils, as the Road Commission knows, and is currently doing work on it today. But these are a series of wetlands that private property that are significant features along the road. Then you'll come to Shalda Creek. Shalda Creek at this point is a fairly wide expanse body of water that's going to require some extensive bridging to get over to Shalda Creek at this point of its location. Then you'll travel along and Traverse Lake Road goes through a mature forest. It's a tree-lined canopy. Trees are close to the road edge here, as you can see from these examples, but it provides an overall canopy that makes part of the beauty of Traverse Lake Road, which is a value to the residents and the private property owners along the road. There's also in the shoulders, you'll find ferns, flowers, included protected lady slippers along the shoulder of Traverse Lake Road. At the east end, you'll come to these critical dunes that are at the east end of the lake. There's several of them along the road. These are protected critical dunes under the state law, and the significance of these dunes is they come right down to the road edge, and these have been very, very unstable over the years. They're just now becoming stabilized with vegetation, but the soils are highly unstable and easily disturbed, creates a real excavation problem. But those are some significant issues that, especially these are slopes greater than 1 to 3, which provide additional protection under the state law. And then, of course, this is a residential street. There's private residential homes. As you go from 669 along Traverse Lake Road, there's several homes, including across the street, where the trail would go right through the front yard, removing trees, fences, close proximity to building structures. But this is probably the only section of the entire 27-mile route that is a residential neighborhood that would incur significant alterations of its character. I mean, obviously the trail is going through Glen Arbor and Empire, but in terms of the impact of the trail on a residential neighborhood, this is probably the only way along the route that's going to have as significant of an impact. This is a scenic road. It's a windy road. There's a lot of very sharp blind curves. From the residents who walk the road, we understand what it's like to meet a car that's coming around the corner. And it's an issue just with the current residential pedestrian traffic and the road traffic that we have. But it is a winding, curvy road. Just briefly, the trail options that have been proposed to date is one is on the existing road. Recently, there's been a proposal to put 5-foot wide shoulders on the road, widening the road from 22 to 32 feet. There is also in the trail report from the Park Service it calls for a separate trail, similar to what's being constructed now, that's offset 10 feet from the road edge. That would go in the county road right away and across private property. The other option, obviously, is to set the trail back a little bit further, maybe up to the 100-foot, which is the proposed wilderness area boundary, that include National Park Service land, but would still go across private land and thus involve the county road right away. The real question that we've been looking at, is there a better option than these? And we believe the answer is yes, and we'll provide you an exposure to that option for consideration. Just real briefly, we'll give you, not to go in depth on this, but the first option of being on the road trail, and again, mixes pedestrian traffic along with vehicular traffic. Obviously, it doesn't impact anything along the road or trees, but there's some significant problems that could arise with that. Just briefly, one is you limit the recreational options. This trail is really proposed as a multi-user, diverse recreational opportunity. So not only just biking, but it's strolling, pushing your baby stroller, wheelchair access, inline skating, cross-country skiing in the winter. A lot of those options would be limited by simply dumping the trail onto the road. So we really defeat the purpose of what the trail vision is. It's a substandard trail experience for the user, especially compared to what's being built from the dune climb to Glen Arbor. This would be a really substandard experience going down a county road. Considerable public safety options. I don't need to elaborate on that in terms of mixing trail traffic and the county road and the liability that goes with that. And then there's also the huge volume impact on local residents. The projected traffic is 350 to 400,000 trail users. If that occurs during the summer month, that's one trail user every 11 seconds or 22 seconds, depending on whether they make a one-way trip or a round trip. Obviously, not all of those will use this section of the trail, but even if 10% of the traffic hit Traverse Lake Road, that would be one person every 2 minutes that would be going along there every day of the year, or every day of the summer. So it does have a significant impact on the local residents. There's also the issue of overburdening township park facilities, routing the trail down, and the only facilities along the entire stretch of the route would be a local township park for local residents, supported by local millages. There's just going to be a significant impact of that park that has not been addressed at all. If we look at the second one, this is a proposal of widening the shoulders on the road, where you put a 5-foot shoulder on each side of the road. The difficulties is you have utility telephone poles. For example, here the telephone poles are right on the road edge. We also have underground utilities that are on the other side. The connections are within that 5 feet. There's mailboxes here. We have tree canopy that is directly at road's edge. So the 5-foot shoulders on either side would significantly impact this aspect. And so just in summary on these options, again, the standards call for a traffic separation if the trail traffic is two-way on one side. That's a 10-foot trail on the north side separated by some barrier, or it's 5-foot shoulders on both sides of the road. Either way, it's some significant impacts. Again, there's limited recreational activities. It's tough to cross-country ski along the shoulder of the road in the wintertime. Substandard experience of simply riding along a road or on a roadbed. There's public safety concerns, obviously not as great as the previous one, but they're still in close proximity. You have utilities, mailboxes to be dealt with. There's removal of trees that provide the canopy and the scenic beauty. You have an impact in the critical dune hills. Again, at the end, those dune hills come right down to the road edge. So there would be an impact to those. You still have wetlands and creek crossings because the shoulder of the road cannot be widened over those wetlands or the creek. There just isn't the soils or the stabilities to do that. So you're looking at boardwalking. And then probably the biggest one is just taking a 22-foot scenic road and changing it to a 32-foot wide highway, if you want to call it. But it significantly alters the look and feel of Traverse Lake Road. And then, of course, we still have the huge traffic volume impact on the residents, the significant ones. If we look at the proposal that's in the trail report, this is for an offset trail 10 feet off the road. separation from the traffic barrier so it meets the safety standards. But if you look at the amount of clearing that takes place for the trail, we're basically impacting part of that canopy and trees, at least much of the way, again, and probably looking at another 20 feet of clearing that goes alongside of the road there in terms of going along the road edge. Again, just a quick summary, not to belabor them, but you're going to require boardwalk construction over the wetland. There's going to be the Shalda Creek bridging, again, that wide expanse at that point. The cutting of trees along the road, the excavation of critical dunes. This is going to become very significant because you have to go in further to the dunes, and I'll talk about that in a bit. The impact on private residences still exists across the front yards of several private property. It's a better trail experience, but it's still marginal, riding along a road, and the costs are going to be significantly greater. The National Park Service budget that's in the trail report for this section is $18,225. That's what the budget is. And you're going to require boardwalking, bridging, removal of trees, clearing of significant dunes. And so there's some difficult challenges within the park report on what those costs are, but it's going to be higher than $18,000. If we look at 100 foot, this is set back a little bit further. Again, this is just similar to the tree clearing that's near Glen Arbor, clearing a path, setting it off from the road. It still will be in the view site. The big impact on the dunes is really excavation of the upland slope of those critical dune areas, altering the look, the feel, retention barriers, whatever, but it's going to be a completely different feel than what those critical dunes are now, plus cutting into some very unstable slopes. Again, here, don't need to expand on these. The board walking along the property, the bridge, Shelter Creek bridging, major clearing through the forest, that still will be in the view side of the road, removal of critical dune hills that become more significant to meet grade, impact on private residences, and the costs become very significant. So if we just look at beyond this a little bit, continuing the trail, it goes from Traverse Lake Road to Bufka Farm. This is going to be a wetlands area, again with poor soil, so there's more board walking required. This is also one of the prime wildlife habitats on this end of the park. It's probably one of the most popular hunting areas because between Bufka Farm and Traverse Lake Road, there is a cedar wetland, and the deer migrate and move from there to the upland dunes and back and forth, and it's a very popular hunting area. So part of the problem with the trail is you're dissecting those patterns. You're now introducing tens of thousands of trail users conflicting with hunters that will be using the same area. So it's just an aspect to consider. If we look north of the Bufka Farms, there's some pretty significant hills and valleys there. I don't know if you've ever looked at that area, but I mean, we're talking ups and downs right on the other side of the guardrail of M22. I'm told there's an engineering solution to that, but it's going to be a significant cost, and it's a real engineering challenge to meet grade. They've actually referenced that in the parks report, the challenges that lie north of Bufka Farm. It's a marginal trail experience riding along M22 compared to some other opportunities. We've had a professional review of the park's environmental assessment report that was actually done by Mansfield and Associates, and they are already doing environmental assessments for other similar type of trail studies on behalf of those that go in. So the environmental assessment by the parks report that you'll provided a copy with did identify certain inconsistencies, errors, and inadequacies in the park report. There's also challenges with the way they determine the scoring system in the back with what they proposed in the text on their scoring systems. There is some question of the basis for determining the impact of the trail routes, and of course trail routes have been changing and without knowing the actual impact of the environmental assessment. So we like to propose a better solution and an option, and that's going along the shore. It uses this historical road that went between 669 and 651, and this along the shore option starts at 669. It goes east along Lake Michigan Drive. You'll come to the picnic area at the end. It would then continue along here to connect to Juniper Lane. Juniper Lane's a gravel road. It would continue to use Juniper Lane, and then it would continue east to 651. So if we look at the pictures, these are the facilities that are at both 651 and 669, which is a great advantage. You can use Lake Michigan Road again, which is a limited road that's there. The area is a transitional stable dune area, so it doesn't require major forest clearing. And this is the existing Juniper Lane that already has a gravel road base that's already in existence. And so if we look at the benefits of that, it uses historical and existing roads. It uses existing trailhead facilities that are at those locations. There's no wetlands that are impacted. There's no significant creek crossings. There is a small seasonal stream that dumps into Good Harbor Bay. There is no forest clearing that's required. There is level topography, so you don't have the dune hill challenges. It's very similar to the dune climb to Glen Haven section. It's minimal construction, significantly lower cost. You can actually construct this trail in weeks. There's no public concerns with the traffic, and again, there's no impact on the residents. So this would be the typical construction that you see along the dune climb to Glen Haven. So we really think the big impact of this is the legacy, which is creating a superior trail experience. And you can have more diverse recreational opportunities on this section of the trail. There's a more natural setting for the user than going along a county road. You can actually take in the sights, sounds, and smells of Lake Michigan, and it could be America's most beautiful trail. So the question with it, is there anything that's a negative? Well, there's one negative, it's the proposed wilderness area, and that's a line that's been drawn on the map by the Park Service. And so the first question is there an impact to the wilderness area? And if you'll notice here, the Traverse Lake Road runs along the southern border of the proposed wilderness area. If we look at the proposed route here along the shore, it would also go on the northern boundary. We are not looking at impacting this contiguous wilderness area, keeping that intact. If we look at the impact in terms of wildlife, again, you could argue that there's more impact over by Buffka Farm of the current trail, and the impact on forest, wetlands, and critical dunes of the Traverse Lake Road option. So how can we deal with the proposed wilderness areas? Maybe there's two different ways. The wilderness area was changed in 2009 from a previous proposed wilderness area. It was changed to accommodate the trail at that point in time. It's also been fine-tuned in certain specific areas since that point. And we think that maybe we can look at, is there a way to move that line a couple hundred feet to accommodate the trail? So that's one option. The other option is providing a wilderness exclusion. This has already been done with county roads. There's a wilderness exemption of 100 feet of county roads that go into the middle of wilderness areas. And there's also the exemption for the Cottonwood Trail. In the general management plan, there's a wilderness exclusion for the Cottonwood Trail to provide an opportunity for large groups to experience the namesake Sleeping Bear Dunes. So maybe perhaps we can provide a similar one for the Heritage Trail to provide a recreational opportunity to experience the namesake Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, which is the full name. So a quick comparison again between these two options. There's no wetlands, there's no creeks, there is a seasonal stream there on the shore, but no large creeks, no mature forest clearing, flat topography, there's no public safety issues, no residential impact, lower construction cost, using existing parking and restroom facilities, more recreational opportunities, it's a superior user experience. Both of them run along the border of the National Wilderness Area, and they both would follow existing or historical roads or follow similar routes. We just want to end with this, that we believe we can do better, and to encourage people to think about the trail user, that we can create a better user experience, that we're hopefully asking that maybe perhaps you can understand and respect the concerns of private residences. For example, if you were living along the road and the trail came across your front yard, how would you feel? And that's all we're asking, is to actually look at it from that perspective of private property owners. We also look at value in public input. We believe that what's been done to date is very helpful, and to encourage an ongoing dialogue and discussion. We're hoping that we can be flexible and open to consider options and what those might be and how we can accomplish it and solve those. And lastly is to create something that's better for future generations. And of course, we think that we can create a real legacy of a superior trail experience. So we thank you today for that opportunity to give you just an insight into some of the concerns along Traverse Lake Road. Maybe perhaps afterwards you could drive the route, but also think, maybe walk along Lake Michigan and look at the opportunities of creating the better trail experience. So we have a packet we'll leave with you that has the report, it has the position paper in writing and all the information, including today's presentation. So we thank you for the opportunity.